terrain, the land on which all of your battles in Total War Warhammer will be fought. So it's important to take into account what kind of terrain you're about to run into and how that could affect your army. Terrain may be favourable or unfavourable to certain kinds of individual units or certain kinds of army builds. Now before we get in depth in the terrain, please take a minute to watch this sponsored ad which helps support this channel and keeps me doing what I am doing. And if you're someone who misses the naval combat from Total War, this one might be for you. World of Warships, a game I'm sure many of you have heard of and maybe some of you even play yourself. It combines the action of blowing up enemy ships with the strategy of doing that efficiently to bring your team victory. With tons of the world's most iconic warships, versatile maps with weather conditions that can change the flow of battle, and constant updates to the games to keep things interesting, there is something for everyone. Although maybe you're thinking, Zerk, this is a Warhammer channel, why the hell are you showing me old ass ships? Well fine, you want to slay things in the name of the God Emperor? Well you can do that too.
Glory to the Emperor!
With the new Warhammer 40k ships, skins, flags, camos and more, you can slay heretics in the name of the God Emperor like never before. But hey, maybe you think the Imperium are a bunch of sissies, and you'd rather collect some skulls for the Skull Throne.
Skulls for the Skull Throne!
Well, the Chaos Marines have arrived as well, so you'll get all the same goodies with them. There's also going to be a bunch of Warhammer themed combat missions, so you'll be able to find out what would really have happened in World War II if the Imperium and the Chaos Marines had joined in. World of Warships is free to play on both PC and consoles, and they're doing a giveaway for first time players with newly registered accounts using the invite codes which you can find in the description of this video. This will get you a premium account, a whole bunch of money, some of the Warhammer skins, all stuff for free, so check it out, links in the description. World of Warships. Now to something that's lacking in World of Warships, terrain. So it seems quite common with newer players in online battles that they don't even look at the map that they're fighting on, let alone consider how it may affect their army. This can lead to some units being turned pretty ineffective at their role or some damn right useless. Or the terrain of the map may offer you an advantage which you don't take advantage of because you didn't check the map and you didn't build your army to make use of it. So what kind of things do we need to look out for and consider? Well, the first thing is quite simply the size of the map. Is it big? Is it small? Is it somewhere in between? Now unfortunately CA doesn't do a good job of really telling us this before the battle. All we get is a little square with a picture in it that gives no real indication to the actual size of the map, so you're just going to be learning them as you go the more you play them. So if you have a really small map, you know that could be difficult for you to maneuver. If you brought a big wide skirmish army or one with lots of cavalry, that small map could be a hindrance. Artillery reliant armies also can be troubled by small maps as they won't have a lot of time to make good use of their range, and thus the enemy will be on top of them quickly. Or if it is a big wide, especially flat map, that could be a good map to choose artillery for, because the enemy won't be able to hide from it and you should be able to hit them and have plenty of time to fire. So do consider the size of the map because it could be favourable or unfavourable to your army build. And then we need to consider the land itself. Is there swampland or shallow water? This slows down infantry, which could make your infantry heavy army, which plan to do a lot of infantry flanking, a little bit less effective than it would be on a normal flat map with no swamps. Large units aren't affected by this shallow water, so maybe you should bring a large heavy army on that swampy map. What about the forest? The forest does the opposite. It slows down large units but doesn't affect infantry, so maybe moving your large army through the forest won't be the best idea, and maybe you shouldn't have brought them in the first place because there's so much forest on this map that you're bound to be fighting in it, and that's going to be just a little disadvantage that everything's moving a bit slower. And you can expect people to want to fight in the forest if they're playing certain factions like the Wood Elves or Beastmen. And then what about elevation, namely hills? Is there a big hill on your side of the map? Can you take advantage of it? Should you play defensive and use ranged and artillery because you have that advantage? Or are you against somebody that might do that to you? The Vampire Coast, the Dwarfs, maybe even the Empire. Maybe you should play one of those factions and go for the defensive option because the advantage is there for you to take. You could play a rush army and ignore the hill, but you'd be kind of missing an opportunity. And as you may have learned from my 5 hidden mechanics video recently, making your enemy fight uphill is very powerful. They'll get tired quicker, be slower, and will be less combat effective against your units that are fighting downhill. So pay attention to the elevation of a map because this can be one of the biggest advantages for somebody to claim, even for a non-defensive rush army. You can still try and hold the hill unless you're under some heavy artillery fire, wait for the enemy to run up it after you and then rush down into them to take advantage of that hill. Even the shallowest, smallest of hills can be useful. Or the shallowest, smallest of hills can also be a massive pain in the arse, mainly for low trajectory missiles and artillery, because they won't be able to shoot over it, so they'll have to move to get a line of sight. This is something I see happen all too often where newer players bring the wrong kind of artillery for their map. Low trajectory artillery like cannons, warp lightning cannons or luminarcs may struggle on particularly hilly maps because line of sight is a bit of a problem for them. It's not necessarily impossible to fire, but finding the right firing position can be a bit fiddly, and there's always the risk that you may click an attack order not realizing that there isn't line of sight, and your unit will start to move to a silly position and get themselves killed. What may be a better choice on this map is high trajectory artillery, something like a Plague Claw catapult. It doesn't need direct line of sight as long as you can see the unit they can fire straight over whatever is in the way. Not only increasing the amount of time they have to do damage, but also reduces the risk of them running off after a target they can't see. And this applies to missile units as well. These Jezels, a low trajectory missile unit much like the warp lightning cannons. They don't fire high, but they are far more accurate with that low trajectory, compared to the poison wind mortars, who are much less accurate but don't have any worries about hills or line of sight. They will simply fire over whatever is in the way, much like the Plague Claw catapult, or any kind of catapult for that matter. And again, much like the artillery, if you issue an attack order when a unit can't see what they're shooting at, they will move to be able to shoot it, which can put them in a terrible position. Again, it's something I see noobs do very often. So be sure to consider the map, its elevation and overall hilliness, and how that may affect the ranged units that you've chosen to bring. Perhaps you should bring the poison wind mortars on the hilly map and the Jezels on the nice open flat map. And don't get me wrong, it's not that Jezels will never be of any use on this map, it'll just be a little bit trickier potentially to get good use out of them. Another thing to consider is features of the land. Maybe a little ridge that could be used to your defensive advantage like this, or maybe that's going to be in the way if you have a big rush army planned, so that could be a problem. Maybe there's a big old monument in the middle of the map that you're going to have to fight around. Maybe there's a little lake, a giant tree, whatever it is, it's something that could help or hinder your game plan. And these are things that you can build your army around, or build your army to be prepared for if you think the enemy might try and make use of something on their side of the map. Unfortunately, again though, CA doesn't really tell us which side of the map we're going to start on, so this can be difficult. But we can see the little land features on the map at least, so those are things that we can consider. So for some examples, when you see the little map preview, whether you're playing in custom battles or quick battles, this will give us a bunch of useful information. Firstly, the elevation. The lighter an area is, the higher up it is, so if there's a big white patch, it means it's a hill. Or if there's a big dark patch in amongst some grey or white patches, then it's a bit of a dip in the land, so that's lower down. But overall, mostly a flat map with just a few dips and hills here and there. Glacial Lake, you can see it's all pretty much the same colour, so it's a completely flat map, only with that hole a bit of an obstacle on the right side. Then we have this map, which as you can see is a good mix of higher ground and lower ground, and there's lots of trees. How is that going to affect your army? This could be a bad one if you bring a rush army that has to run up the hill, depending on where you start. Gleaming Oasis, a relatively flat map, bit of a hill at one end, a couple of little obstacles in the way. You may be able to use those to your defensive advantage, or they may get in your way if you plan to rush. Perhaps you're going to bring in a big flank, but those obstacles will slow you down. If I was taking this Greenskins army for example, which does rely on a heavy flank from all of this cavalry, this could be hindered by these two obstructions that the enemy could use to their advantage by using it to protect one of their sides, making my flank a lot harder. What about Glooming Wood? We can see lots of trees straight through the middle of the map. They must be somewhat lower down because they're all kind of shaded grey. And then either side of that we've got a lot of white, so there must be some elevation. So a fairly hilly map that could be okay for my build, but those trees might slow my cavalry down a bit. Golden Monolith, a fairly hilly map on the sides, but you don't really go up there to fight, but you could use that for a defensive advantage if you really wanted to. There is a bit of a monument in the middle of course, which could slow you down. Golden Tributes. This would be an absolutely horrendous map for this army because I wouldn't be able to maneuver my cavalry at all. You won't see this map very often, it certainly won't be in quick battles, but it's still something to remember. This map, Gorkazan, pretty flat, a little bit of an obstacle at the edge, a bit lower down in the centre, so that should be fairly simple. Grimmenhagen, another one you probably won't see in quick battles, but this would be absolutely terrible for my army. I have no room to maneuver. I'd be in the trees if I was maneuvering, which would slow all my cavalry down. There's a ton of choke points which the enemy will be able to stop my flank with, so it just wouldn't be a good map for this build. Helfen, a fairly flat map, but there is the swamp shallow water. which will be good for my cavalry as they'll be able to go through it easily, but my infantry will be slowed down as I've got quite a lot of both, so maybe some more larger monsters could take advantage of not being slowed down on this map. Hidden Waystone. A pretty flat map, but there is a little bit of a watery stream running through the middle that will slow you down for a second. But the biggest problem to my Greenskins army is these two little ridges that will create a nice choke point for the enemy to slow down and stop my entire game plan. So my army would need to change if I was fighting on this map. So hopefully you get the idea from this. Look at the elevation, look at the trees. Are there any obstacles in the way? Could you use them? Are they going to be used against you? Blah blah blah. You get the idea, I hope. So there you go. The terrain and how you need to consider it when building your army. And it's all about just trying to gain little advantages, or at least not giving yourself disadvantages. There's no surefire win option with the perfect faction and the perfect build on the perfect map, but there are little things we can do with our armies to make them a little bit more suitable for the terrain. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, do check out the World of Warship stuff in the description if you're interested, and I'll see you in the future.